So our project is about the fruit industry workforce in the Goulburn Valley. So we're interested in people. We're interested in, does the fruit industry have the people it needs? Will it have the people it needs in the future? If not, why not? And what can be done about it, and by who? And as well as myself and Ruth Nettle from the university, we've got on our team Lisa Cowan and Kathy Mansfield from Agriculture Victoria here in Tatura. So workforce is an issue across agriculture, across Australia and also internationally. There was a Victorian parliamentary inquiry into the issue of attracting people into agriculture a couple of years ago. And it's also come up very recently as an issue in the fruit industry here in the Goulburn Valley, in the Goulburn Valley Food Futures Innovation and Cluster Project. Growers identified that labour and skills shortages are a major concern for their enterprises. This graphic down the bottom right here is from the final report of that Innovation and Cluster Project, and the final report identified 4 issues for further work, and labour is one of them. And in that work, the growers identified 2 kind of areas of labour requirements where they were seeing issues. One was in the picking and packing area, but the other was in the specialist or higher skilled labour area. And given that this is a scoping study with a relatively limited budget, we've decided that we'll focus our work on that issue because we don't think that's been much looked at yet. And connecting to some things that Mitch said earlier, we know that there's a lot of activity in horticulture about using robotics and using new technologies, using things like drones. So the chances are that going forward 5 or 10 years, the fruit industry is going to need different people to what it needs now, and it's going to need more highly skilled people. So I guess our question is it going to have those people? Is it going to be able to keep them? And how are those people going to be developed within the industry? The expertise that we bring to this project, Ruth Nettle has been really leading this field of social research on workforce in agriculture for some years now. She's done work at the national scale and also the regional scale in the dairy industry, and she's been involved in work with the cotton industry in a number of production regions through New South Wales and Queensland. So we have a bit of a track record of how to ask questions about the structure of an agricultural sector workforce, and also how to ask questions about what do you do at a regional scale or an industry scale to proactively try and develop your regional or industry workforce. And then Agriculture Victoria, of course, has the knowledge of the fruit industry, the relationships with the fruit industry, and also that link into the world of policy. So we're bringing those 2 resources together. Often when people think about workforce in agriculture, they think in terms of how many people do we need, and what skills do we need, and which TAFE course do we plug those people into, and have we got enough TAFE places, and that's the end of the story. The research on workforce issues in agriculture actually demonstrates that it's a bit more complicated than that. There are a range of dynamics that influence how people come into an industry, whether they stay there, and how they get their skills developed within that industry. So in talking about a systemic view of workforce, we're thinking about the attractiveness of the work on offer, the way people enter and move through a sector, so career paths within an industry. I was talking to Russell about that over lunch. How skills are formed. People don't get their skills only from their formal training, they build their skills through their career. How does that happen in the food industry? There's the interaction between policy and employment services, and there's the interaction between what's happening in terms of employment within a farm business and the other economic pressures that are on that business. And based on some work that Lisa did in the department last year, we also think that in the fruit industry it probably makes sense to think about workforce not as only workforce within farm businesses, but workforce across the value chain of the fruit industry. So workforce within the suppliers, the advisory sector, service providers, farms, and then downstream businesses as well. So at this stage, this is what in our project we're calling the skilled workforce system. These are the employers of people. So are these different kinds of businesses going to have the people with the right skills that they need into the future? What kind of roles are these? and how do people move through those roles in their career, I guess is what we're interested in finding out. That's the structure of the workforce. And then the next question is, who can do what to influence that? Who's thinking about attracting, retaining and developing people within that system of employers? So that brings our attention to the education and training providers, the employment services, and of course the policy context. And thinking about policy, we think about industry institutions and what they're doing, as well as government and what government's doing. So this is, I suppose, the framework for our research. How are these players working together to think about and act on making sure that the industry will have the people it needs in the future? In terms of specific research activities, we think we'll start by pulling together what existing information there is on who works in the fruit industry, what roles do they work in, and what kind of career paths are there. We don't know whether there is much of that information out there. We haven't found a great deal yet. Then we plan to interview some key people with knowledge of the different employer segments within the industry to find out what their impressions are of workforce needs and issues and barriers, and use that to inform a more quantitative survey of both employers and employees, so we can start having some solid quantitative evidence on what the issues are. And then we plan on reporting those findings back to a group like this, probably around this time next year. The other thing that did occur to us is that the dairy industry has been working on workforce development as a topic for some years now, 8 to 10 years. Those two industries exist side by side here in the Goulburn Valley, so there could be some benefit in getting some dairy industry people to talk to some fruit industry people about this topic of industry scale and regional scale workforce development. So I guess we're hoping that we can produce some initial scoping study data that will be of interest to the industry in informing them about the structure of their workforce and where the issues and barriers are. And we're hoping that could also inform a decision about whether people are interested in doing further research on workforce or coming up with some actions on workforce development for the industry.